First ever NCAA Women's Wrestling Championship title has been crowned. Women's Sports Sundays are now a thing on ESPN, and the reasoning behind it, as well as two pioneers in women's MMA come out of retirement to make the fight that should have happened over a decade ago. Stay tuned. Stay locked into the Mack Truck Podcast. We got more for you coming up next.
Mack Truck, a.k.a. your worst nightmare. Mack Truck, a.k.a. your worst nightmare. Mack Truck, a.k.a. your worst nightmare. Mack Truck.
Game day energy starts right here. This is the Mack Truck Podcast. Big plays, big opinions, and zero hesitation. Turn it up. Let's talk sports. Listen, if y'all have not gotten on board with the fact that women's college wrestling is a thing, y'all need to stay tuned to the show. Welcome in. Again, you're listening to the Mack Truck Podcast. My name is Mac. We're here to talk sports. It's our women's episode, so let's roll right into it. The 2026 inaugural NC Women's National Wrestling Championship Tournament was this past weekend. As far as the top of March, there is a current and new and first ever crowned champion for women's collegiate wrestling. And listen, if you didn't get to watch this tournament, I highly suggest you start to get into it. Because just as much as we love high school wrestling for girls and boys, we love collegiate wrestling for men and women. Okay? Anybody that's followed the sport knows how big the NCAA men's tournament is. The now NCAA women's tournament, which is the first of its kind, has concluded. And when I tell you it rocked, y'all. Listen, it was held at the Extreme Arena in my home state of Iowa, specifically Coralville, Iowa, specifically very close to the University of Iowa, which is known for its dominance in wrestling and now women's wrestling as well, especially when it comes to really any sport, including football. And don't try to talk your mess to me. I said what I said. Hawkeye football has always been dominant. Just because we ain't got some national championships since 1965 don't mean anything. But the matter is Iowa sports are very dominant when it comes to the Midwest, and wrestling is no exception to that. Okay. Like I said, this is the first ever of its kind in terms of the tournament style itself. The tournament invited D1 through D3 schools to compete across the board in multiple weight classes in Coralville, Iowa. Women's wrestling became the 91st NCAA championship sport as of January of 2025. And the sport itself previously had 76 schools sponsoring the sport. Now they have 95 sponsoring the sport. And all this information you can find on NCAA.com, ESPN.com, and YahooSports.com. So some of the top sports teams in terms of wrestling coming into this tournament, I'm going to give you the top 5, then we're going to give you the finals for the tournament itself. The Iowa Hawkeyes were one of the top teams in terms of women's wrestling, obviously in the Big Ten. Preseason #1 consistent leader in the polls all season. McKendree State Bearcats, they are in the Great Lakes Valley Conference, consistently ranked at #1 and #2, and had very great representation between the top 10 nationally. That's including Iowa. That's including a lot of the Power 5 schools. North Central Cardinals, College of Conference of Illinois and Wisconsin. Lots of high-ranking wrestlers between the top 5 and top 10 as well. Consistent top ranks across the season as well. #4, Grand Valley State Lakers, also in the Great Lakes Valley Conference in terms of collegiately, ranked #4 in the nation with great top 10 and top 5 representation. And finally, coming in at #5 for the top schools to come into this tournament as of last week before the tournament, King University Tornado, Conference of the Carolinas, preseason ranking was #5 nationally and worked their way into that #5 national ranking. Now we're going to get into some of the final stats here for the first ever NC Women's National Wrestling Championship. McKendree State takes the crown. They are the national champions. They ended the tournament with 157.7 points. The University of Iowa came in at the runner-ups at 149 points flat. North Central College came in at #3 at 117.5 points. Grand Valley State University came in at #4 at 106.5 points, and Presbyterian College came in at #5 with 83.5 points. Listen, I wrestled a little bit in high school, and obviously, if you know me, switched over to MMA and kickboxing. So I personally love to see the sport grow as much as it has. Obviously, we're now seeing in high schools, girls are wrestling in high school and they're wrestling boys on top of that. And listen, if you're one of those old school ass people who's just like, oh, girls shouldn't be wrestling boys. Well, I hate to break it to you. Sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Your problem is you don't want your son or child rather to be upset or get made fun of for being beaten by a girl. Or you seem to think that girls have a disadvantage because of the fact that they are female, neither of which are true. So let's just get out of this 1955's mindset, okay? And let's understand that sports don't have a gender. While they are separated by gender, sports don't have a gender. Again, I come on my show and I say this to y'all, whether we're in the live stream, whether on the station right now, we're in the studio, sports are what bring people together. Sports have no gender. If you can perform the athletic task to the best of your ability and beat your competitor, that is what it's all about. Obviously, winning said title, said sport, whatever that looks like, is what it's all about. I mean, and I don't understand why people seem to think that in 2026, men and women and girls and boys can't compete against each other. It drives me absolutely nuts. Obviously, anatomy and science is a thing, but anatomy and science has been disproven. It is a thing. You can argue with your wall, argue with your mama, argue with your mammy, argue with a cow. You ain't arguing with me. You will not win that debate with me, and I will make it known that you will not win that debate with me. Listen, the fact that it has taken so long to get women and girls wrestling rather on the map is crazy to me. But the fact that it's come so far so fast is also what's the better part about this entirety of a situation. I absolutely love it. Okay. Just being able to watch, just my school specifically, obviously, University of Iowa. I went to the school, diehard Hawkeye fan. And anytime that we can add another collegiate sport and an opportunity for girls and women to compete competitively at a collegiate level or even at a professional level, I'm for it. Y'all know that I'm for this. Being able to watch what the Iowa Hawkeye women have done in the past 2 seasons, since the start, the inaugural season for the Iowa Hawkeye women's wrestling team to now, and the fact that they are the runner-up, the runner-ups for the first ever women's national championship tournament is fantastic. We love to see it. We love thriving here at the Mack Truck Show. Okay, we love any opportunity for girl power. That's what it is. And don't get me wrong. Obviously, we talk all kinds of sports here, but this is specifically our women's episode. So it's nothing about women empowerment here, okay? It's nothing but uplifting women's sports, shining a light on women's sports, bringing awareness to women's sports. But that doesn't necessarily mean we downplay, our brethren counterpart, our male counterpart, however you want to look at that. And that's the other thing. And just to kind of bring it full circle here in terms of the NC Women's Championship Wrestling inaugural title season is, you don't have to tear somebody else's thing down to raise somebody up. You can raise somebody up without bringing somebody down. And that's on either side, whether it's a women's sport or a men's sport, whether you're a man trying to uplift, quote unquote, normal sports. And I use that term very loosely and with air quotes, but y'all can't see me because I'm in the studio. So air quotes, normal sports, or air quotes, women's sports, because again, sports have no gender. Fact of the matter is, sports is what brings us together. Sports is really, and could be, and should be, and really is the cure-all for all things real world and really just unsanctified funk, okay? Either way, you'll love to see the growth of sports in general. And we have another conversation for another part 2 episode, if you will, in terms of women's combative sports at a high level regarding the GOAT herself, Clarissa Shields, and Rolly Romero, welterweight champion in the pro boxing circuit. We're going to get to that a little bit later on down the line for this week's shows. But either way, listen, y'all need to get into women's wrestling. Y'all need to get behind the fact that women's sports are not going nowhere. They're not going nowhere. Even if you tried, they're not going nowhere, because you probably have a daughter or a sister or cousin or a spouse that is either a female athlete or wants to be a female athlete. So I'm here to tell you personally, still as a female athlete to this day, women's sports don't owe y'all nothing. Everybody watches women's sports, and women's sports are not going anywhere. Listen, new topic, same drive. We're going to get right into it, okay? For those of you who watch and tune in to the Entertainment and Sports Programming Network, better known as ESPN, ESPN is introducing a brand new segment this summer called Women's Sports Sundays. ESPN has recently announced that this is going to be the first type of show of its kind on primetime programming. The primetime programming franchise places women's sports at the center of the women's sports calendar. Again, to debut this summer, 2026. Again, you can find all this information at ESPNpressroom.com via Garrett Cohen. Just because, we always got to cite our sources, all the things, okay? This segment, really, not even segment, but this show itself will feature top-tier WNBA and NWSL matchups presented by Ally, going over the biggest moments, the biggest stars, and the biggest games across the ESPN platform itself. Also, the leadership itself is amplified by ESPNW. That is Entertainment and Sports Programming Network Women, featuring women's sports. That is a channel. ESPNW is a channel, just like ESPN 1, 2, 3, Deportes, ESPNU for all things collegiate sports, things of that nature. The leadership for the Women's Sports Sunday is going to be headed up and led by the leadership, ESPNW. And just for a little bit more background, because obviously there are a lot of, different takes. People have different opinions, things like that. So the reasoning behind this is because the original show that was on Sunday nights was Sunday Night Baseball. Obviously, again, if you watch the show, if you watch sports, the show meaning channel in terms of ESPN, Sunday Night Baseball has been on the docket for that primetime spot for just about 30 to 35 years. Now, the Baseball Tonight contract has expired. The contract has expired. So they didn't necessarily lose it, but they didn't necessarily clamor to have it back on to that primetime spot. Now, my thoughts on this entire thing is I, obviously, being a female athlete and trying to still make some dreams and ambitions come true and all the things, I think this is a wonderful idea. I think it's been a long time coming. I'm not really a fan, however, of it being introduced in the summer, because it just kind of makes it seem like women's sports weren't important enough to have a primetime spot in the first place. However, I will say that, obviously you have to start somewhere. And in order to keep building women's sports and keep building the fact that women's sports still exist, is you got to give it a primetime spot on Sundays. And a lot of people watch the primetime spot on Sundays, especially with loads of baseball games on the multiple ESPN channels, loads of we're still in NBA season right now. We're in Paralympic season. We're in the very beginning stages of March Madness. So there's a lot of things still happening on those Sunday slots, after games, afternoon games, things like that. So I completely understand it. I really do, however, think, and obviously because I'm super biased when it comes to some of this type of stuff. So just don't get me wrong here. I think they should also have a focus on women's tackle football. Okay. And obviously I say that being a recently retired player. Okay. Also because the Women's Football Alliance, better known as the WFA, already has its championship weekend and All-Star weekend games aired on ESPN2. Also, having their All-Star weekend and championship weekend in Canton, Ohio, at the Hall of Fame Stadium. Okay, so and there's more to the coverage of women's sports than just the WNBA, the NWSL, and the PWH. I completely understand that those are currently the top 3 major professional women's sports entities. But if we're going to do this, if we're going to promote the sanctity and the greatness and the uplifting and the awareness of said subject of women's sports, you got to do 90% of women's sports. That includes completely professional and semi-professional, AAA, minors. it's the same thing as it is when you're covering sports on the normal ESPN channels with the normal time slots, things like that. Now, obviously, with Women's Sports Sundays, they'll also be featuring things like the WSL, the W Grand Slam tennis, Athletes Unlimited, and things of that nature. Like I said, I truly think that for this to really go in the direction that they want, they have to cover everything. That also includes women's combative sports, wrestling, power slap, boxing, MMA, things of that nature. Because again, it's not just those first couple leagues that I have mentioned. The women's sports is everywhere. There's also the Women's Professional Baseball League that is starting this summer. For those of you who remember Monet Davis, who played and had a tremendous outing as a little league baseball pitcher, she is trying out for that league. I believe she's already made the teams, things like that. But that is also coming up. So there's so many different avenues that this Women's Sports Sunday slot can just take up. It's unreal. It's quite unreal. And frankly, I can't wait. I have been clamoring for this for a long time. I didn't necessarily think it was going to be on a platform like ESPN because ESPN has so much going on. Right? And, and people have their opinions about the different shows and the new types of formats that ESPN is using or that has had. But it's just, you have to start somewhere. You can't superly knock it. Obviously, everybody has their opinions. As I have, and I do. This is why I have my own show. This is why I gave you my opinion. But I genuinely overall love the idea. I just really hope that it's truly going to be all inclusive of women's sports. That includes, like I said, highlights. It includes games. It includes scores. It includes everything that women's sports has to offer. Current stars, up and coming stars, old stars, just like you would with the counterpart of said sport. Now, I also think that they could spin this another way and kind of do like a college game day style rather than just focusing on college football as college game day does. If you love college football, obviously you watch college game day, all the things. I think they could do the same exact thing for women's college basketball, women's college wrestling, okay? Things of that nature. WWE, because there's Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, things of that nature that are also on ESPN. So there's so many different avenues that this women's football Sunday segment can go. And I've also had a lot of like differing opinions. And, obviously you're going to have your old school heads, your, old school minds thinking in terms of sports. Like, I'm so used to watching, Sunday night football or Sunday night baseball rather on those primetime spots. But there's nothing wrong with change. In order to keep a sport growing and keep an entity on its feet, you have to introduce it to new markets. And this market right here, in terms of putting women's sports Sundays in that Sunday night primetime spot, is a perfect way to introduce more of the women's leagues, more of the women's sports. Again, not just the WNBA, not just the NWSL. It's definitely Grand Slam tennis, Athletes Unlimited. It's the WSL, the WLL, the WFA, the WNFC. Okay, the UFC in terms of the women, PFL in terms of the women. Okay, power slap, combat, karate, and I can go on. Women's hockey, especially women's hockey, women's baseball, powerlifting. Like, there are so many ways that this thing could go. It's wild to even think about. But of course, you always have to start somewhere, and this is the best way to start, is to introduce it on its own show, on its own time slot in that Sunday evening prime time selection. So we're looking forward to it here as a whole in studio. I'm excited. And if you're not excited, you should definitely try and be excited about said thing. Now, I want to give a big shout out to In My Bag Apparel and Customs by Evan Bradfield, the official partner and sponsor of the Mack Truck Pod. And right now, when you shop online at inmybag.bigcartel.com and use the word truck, you'll save 15% off your entire first order. Again, that's code word truck, TRUCK, for 15% off at checkout when you shop online at inmybag.bigcartel.com. You can also find In My Bag Apparel on the TikTok shop as well as the Whatnot app. Make sure you tell them that the Mack Truck sent you. Again, you can get all things Mack Truck. You can also get all things Mama Combat, okay? All things knitted jerseys. Knitted jerseys just dropped. Got my order in here in a little bit. Like I said, when you use the word truck at inmybag.bigcartel.com, you get 15% off your entire first order. Listen, moving on into the last segment here for the show. And if y'all know me, y'all know how much I love combat sports, collision sports, specifically boxing and MMA. Y'all also know how much of a Ronda Rousey fan I am. And y'all know how much of a Gina Carano fan I am. So if you've been paying attention, it is announced Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano are coming out of retirement for the dream fight that should have happened over a decade ago. And what I mean by that is this fight literally should have happened over a decade ago. Quite literally. Ronda Rousey, Gina Carano should have had this fight a while ago. Obviously, things happen. We're going to get into those details here in just a second. So for those of you who don't know, Gina Carano is one of women's MMA pioneers. She left the sport in 2009 after her loss to Chris Cyborg. Okay. Anybody who watches MMA knows MMA. We all know who Chris Cyborg is. We know who Chris Cyborg was back then. Chris Cyborg is nothing to mess with. Okay? Gina Carano, however, was one of the very first women to open up the doors and create opportunities for women to fight in MMA. I'm not talking to UFC. I'm just talking in MMA in its entirety. Okay. Gina Carano was fighting people like Julia Kenzie. She was fighting people like Chris Cyborg. She was fighting people like Sarah McCann. She was fighting people and women that had pedigrees just like her. But it took her spunk and her tenacity to keep going for people to realize, oh, like she could throw a punch. Like, holy crap, did you see that cross? Like there's women out here competing in MMA. Now, when we flip to the other side of this with Ronda Rousey, who retired back in 2016, again, over a decade ago, after losing to Amanda Nunes, trying to get the women's bantamweight belt back. Ronda Rousey was the first female champion of the UFC, helping to bring women's MMA to its mainstreams in terms of she was her and Liz Carmouche were the first women to headline a UFC card at UFC 157. Rousey versus Carmouche. Ronda Rousey became I mean the mainstream reason why women fight in the UFC to this day. Because if you guys remember, right when the UFC started getting hot, as the Ultimate Fighter series started to take off, when Spike picked it up after Dana White and the Zuffa brothers started to invested their last, I think it was $2 or $3 million into the sport. Dana White is known and will forever be known for talking to TMZ and saying that women will never fight in the UFC. And Ronda Rousey made it her mission to prove to him that you will make more money. Two, women can fight and compete in mixed martial arts at a high level. It is just like boxing. Women and girls fight at a high level in boxing as well. Need I remind you of a Christy Martin? Need I remind you of a Layla Ali? Need I remind you of an Ann Wolfe? Need I remind you of a Vonda Ward? Okay. Need I remind you now of a Lisa Baumgartner? Need I remind you now of a Michaela Mayer? And obviously the GOAT, Clarissa Shields. So women have been fighting in combat sports at a high level for a very, very long time. The only difference was when you tell a woman or you make a statement like that saying women will never fight in the UFC, you have just opened up and unleashed an entirely different type of individual. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Being a person of that very similar pedigree, you have opened up an entire different world of motivation, mindset, and the pure fact that I'm going to prove you wrong. Because that's what I do, is I prove you wrong. That's what Ronda Rousey did. That's what Gina Carano did. And if you watch some of the some of the pressers and some of the stories and interviews coming out from Gina and Ronda, they're both stating about, things that have changed in their life. In fact, in an interview earlier this week, Gina Carano was doing the presser with Ronda Rousey. And obviously, and this card is also underneath MVP Promotions, which is the promotion of Jake Paul. This is also going to be the very first MMA promotion, or MMA card rather, under the MVP Promotions and aired on Netflix as well. So not only is Jake Paul out here doing things for women's boxing, he's also doing things for MMA, which also include bringing stars back to the forefront of the sport. And it's pretty crazy that Ronda Rousey it's not crazy if you know what she went through and how, excuse me, the UFC kind of went through. It's, excuse me, getting over a cold, so I got some stuff going on. If you knew what Ronda Rousey went through in terms of trying to get money and trying to bring the women's portion of the sport to the forefront, you know that the UFC is rumored to not pay its athletes very well. Jake Paul and MVP Promotions has changed that. And when I mean what if, like I talked about at the top of the show, this is the what if fight. Meaning, what if these two fought each other a decade ago? Would that prove one is better than the other? Would it prove which decade of women's MMA is more dominant? We're going to see on May 16th, okay? I'm excited. There's going to be more. The presser's already out. Fight camps are already happening. Content's already being made. I absolutely cannot wait. And I'm going to jump into something real quick in terms of just the stigma that is behind women's combative sports, specifically Claressa Shields, the GOAT, the most decorated and the best women's boxer to this day. Claressa Shields, anybody that knows Claressa Shields, that's watched her fights, watched her interviews, all the things, everybody knows Claressa Shields means business, and she stands on what she says. She's very confident in her boxing, as she should be. She's very confident in her skills, as she should be. Now, we all know that Claressa Shields has also gone on record several times stating that she would be one to willingly face a male boxer in a match. I am for it. To be quite honest with you, I am absolutely for the fact that women should be competing against men and next to them as well. Now, what I mean by that is Claressa Shields has gone on record in multiple places stating that she would beat a fully trained male boxer of her similar weight class, specifically Rolly Romero. Now, Claressa Shields was on the Club Shay Shay podcast with Shannon Sharp and Chad Ochocinco. And this is what frustrates me, because there are so many dudes, Shannon Sharp included, that are very old school. I mean, and having an old school mindset when it comes to sports isn't a new thing. This isn't new. It's not like newsflash. This is unfortunately a stigma that is kind of just a thing across the board when it comes to natural society and the female being. Now, Uncle Shannon goes on the show with Claressa and cousin Ochocinco and basically tells Claressa Shields that she's not beating a fully trained man. And yet he couldn't tell me why. He couldn't say why. Just because you're a dude does not automatically give you the advantage to win. Doesn't give you the advantage to beat a woman. That's not how that works. And everybody's going to go, oh, well, science. Science has been proven wrong before. Quite literally. I'll tell you guys to do some research. Here's your homework. Go to YouTube. Go to the old, and this was something ESPN used to do a long time ago. ESPN Sports Science. Okay. Look up Lucia Riker. Watch the entire thing and then go from there. Now, I will tell you this, obviously, that video in science and all the things back then is a lot different than what it is now. it's also progressed from that clip, that science experiment to now. My point is Shannon Sharpe, you played football. You're in the Hall of Fame as one of the best tight ends to ever touch a football. Just because you played football doesn't make you the guru of boxing. You don't know how boxing works. You may be a fan of boxing. You may watch the sport. You may be friends with boxers, but that doesn't necessarily mean you know how the sport works. And let me just tell you that right now. There's a lot of boxing fans that don't know how the sport works. There's a lot of women's boxers that still to this day are multiple weight class champions, have multiple belts in multiple federations that still don't know how boxing works. Clarissa knows how boxing works. Layla Ali knows how boxing works. Christy Martin knew how boxing works. Okay? Ann Wolfe. I would put, if you want me to be honest, I would put Ann Wolfe in a ring still to this day with any dude boxing right now, and she would eat them for breakfast. It's also crazy to me that Shakur Stevenson, who has agreed with Clarissa Shields multiple times that she would beat Rolly Romero, and Shannon Sharpe went on his show and formed his mouth to say that Shakur Stevenson is just mad because he, in a nutshell, was downplaying his career. Shannon Sharpe, what you don't want to do is you don't want to compare careers with two different sports, because someone's going to be upset. I'll tell you, it's not going to be Shakur Stevenson. I'll tell you that right now. Hate to break it to you, Unc, but it ain't going to be Shakur Stevenson. At the end of his career, I can guarantee you he's probably going to have the same amount of success, if not more, than you have. But you're also older. You're 55, 56-year-old granddad with 3 or 4 grandkids. And that's no knock. We love a family. We love when you can retire from your career and live your life, which is exactly what you're doing. But for you to sit there on your show and to run your mouth about something you don't actually know, just because you think the fact that Clarissa Shields is a woman and she can't beat a man, that's great. And the one point he talked about was Rolly Romero, it would come in there trying to blow her head off because she questioned his manhood. So what's the difference between her, quote unquote, questioning his manhood and his manliness and you questioning her confidence as a woman and an athlete? What's the difference? You cannot sit there and tell me that mindset is different, because it's not. Because what you're not going to do is you're not going to come on your own platform and run your mouth and then try to backtrack when someone tells you what it is, because you're not boxing. You're not a boxer. You don't even box to work out. And if you do, you're honestly probably not that great at it. I would piece you up, to be quite honest with you. And I'm 5'10", and I'm an actual heavyweight. So just imagine when I put a jab on you, or she puts a jab on you. She's the heavyweight boxing women's champion. And you think an average Joe could beat her, but now you also think that Rolly Romero could beat her just because he's a dude? No, that's crazy talk. Keith Thurman said some of the same things. Oh, I would, let her showcase her stuff in an exhibition. No, if we're boxing, we're boxing. It's not sparring. It's a sanctioned match. But I'll tell you, that fights like that, 99% of the time aren't going to happen, because people in society are still in this absolutely horrid and asinine mindset that women are too fragile and women shouldn't be playing sports at all and women shouldn't be competing against men. And that's the bottom damn line. That is just not damn true. And with that, that's all I have for y'all today. Sorry, I had a little coughing fit because I'm still getting over the winter allergies and all the things. But make sure you share, like, subscribe, and share it with a friend or a fan that really knows the game the way we do. Okay? We're back every week, couple shows a week. This week, I believe we only have one, just because we got some new adulting schedule and all the things. Make sure you're tuning in. You can find the Mack Truck Podcast anywhere you get your audio listening pleasure. Also, big shout out to In My Bag Apparel again for that 15% off at inmybag.bigcartel.com. When you use the word truck, it's TRUCK, for 15% off of all things In My Bag Apparel and Customs attire. We love it. And be prepared for a brand new sponsor and partner to be added to this list. And it's going to be great, because this is something that has been in the making for a while. We finally got things linked together. So stay tuned for that. And until then, stay tuned, stay sporty. We'll see you on the next run.
Mack Truck, aka your worst nightmare.